This recording is one of a series that provides further guidance on the assessments for the 4 units of the Foundation Certificate in People Practice. This recording focuses on 3CO01, Business Culture and Change in Context. Assessments are revised on a regular basis, and this guidance is based on the June 2024 version. The last moderation window for this assessment is September 2025. This assessment requires written answers to 9 questions. The 9 assessment criteria from the unit form the basis of the task, and you have 2,500 words with which to write your assessment. Although the word count does not have to be split evenly, it's useful to allocate around 2,800 words per AC to ensure each AC is covered in sufficient depth. You have an additional 10% words too, but if you exceed the maximum word count, 2,500 plus 10%, your submission will be rejected and referred. You should relate your answers to your own organisation or an organisation with which you are familiar, ideally one that you have worked for. The same organisation should be used for all 9 answers. It is important to adhere to this instruction, as answers that don't cannot pass. Your response to the assessment should be submitted in a Word document. This assessment requires you to produce written answers. The document you submit for assessment should include the assessment question number, the question, and the AC reference, followed by your response to the question. When calculating the word count, you should only include your answers. We will now move to the questions in the assessment brief. Question 1 asks you to examine 2 key external influences impacting or likely to impact the activities of the organisation that you work for or an organisation with which you are familiar. To manage word count, it is important to focus on 2 factors. You can choose any 2, but it is important that they are external influences or factors rather than internal. You may decide to use a tool such as a pestle analysis to help identify which external factors are affecting the organisation. 2 key factors could then be chosen. However, there's no need to, and you should not include a full pestle analysis in the answer. You should be clear which organisation the answer is based on and name the organisation. Remember, the same organisation must be used for all answers in this assessment. Question 2 requires you to discuss the main business goal of the organisation that you work for or an organisation with which you are familiar, and discuss why it is important for that organisation to plan how they will achieve the goal. You should break down the question and check both parts are addressed. Firstly, you should discuss the main business goal. This means you don't need to write about all of the business goals. Second, you should discuss why it's important for that organisation to plan for how they will achieve the goal. Research may be needed if you don't know what the goals of your chosen organisation are. Question 3 asks you to discuss the products and or services of the organisation that you work for or an organisation with which you are familiar, and discuss the organisation's main customers. You should break the question down and check both parts are addressed. To address the part where you discuss the organisation's products or services, you may find your organisation only provides or sells products or only provides or sells services. Whatever is the reality of your organisation, you should base your answer on this. However, you should take care not to copy and paste from the organisation's website. When discussing the main customers, the focus is on external customers of the products and/or services that are being discussed. When discussing customers, you could consider whether customers are end consumers or another business. You could discuss whether customers purchase or use a product once, or whether they are repeat customers, and whether customer loyalty is important. There is no requirement to include evidence of the use of referencing to wider reading to achieve a high pass, a mark of 4 for AC 1.3. Question 4 asks you to review how file sharing and video conferencing can be used to improve working practices and collaboration within people practice in your organisation or an organisation with which you are familiar. This question is focusing on the use of technology in the people profession and specifically the use of file sharing and video conferencing. In answering this question, you should review how file sharing and video conferencing can be used by people professionals in your chosen organisation, rather than write about their use elsewhere in the organisation. If you don't have the correct focus, the answer is unlikely to pass. You should also consider the link between using file sharing and video conferencing and improving working practices and collaboration. When answering question 5, you should break down the question and check both parts are addressed. You're asked to define organisational culture, that's the first part, and explain why it is important to foster an effective and appropriate workplace culture in your organisation or an organisation with which you are familiar. You should start by defining what culture is. This part of the answer could be supported with recognised definitions. Then you should explain why it's important to foster an appropriate and effective workplace culture in your organisation. In question 6, you should explain how culture is part of a whole system and explain how people professionals' work and actions could impact elsewhere in your organisation or an organisation with which you are familiar. Again, you need to break the question down and check both parts are addressed. When explaining how culture is part of a whole system, reference could be made to well-known models such as McKinsey's 7S, Galbraith's STAR model and Burke-Litwin model. Once it is established that organisations are whole systems, an explanation of how people professionals' work and actions could impact elsewhere in your organisation can be added. To develop knowledge and understanding of this subject, you could explore organisation design theory. The CIPD fact sheet on organisation design is a great place to start. Questions 7, 8 and 9 all relate to change driven by an economic downturn and challenging trading conditions. It is important to address each question separately rather than combine the answers. It doesn't matter whether your chosen organisation is trading in an economic downturn or in challenging trading conditions at the time of writing your answer. If these conditions are not present, you can still answer the question. In question 7, you need to explain why it is important that organisational change driven by economic downturn and challenging trading conditions is planned and effectively managed in your organisation? You could consider organisational and individual impacts when answering this question. Question 8 asks you to explain the importance and role that could be played by people professionals in your organisation or an organisation with which you are familiar within change driven by economic downturn. Rather than explain the importance and role in any change situation, your knowledge and understanding should be applied to change driven by an economic downturn. Remember to explain the importance and role within the context of your chosen organisation. Question 9 asks you to discuss how organisational change driven by economic downturn could impact people in your organisation or an organisation with which you are familiar in different ways. The focus is now on employees. The attention is turned to the people who work in your chosen organisation and how they could be impacted by change driven by economic downturn. Although there are many potential negative impacts, you could also consider positive impacts. For example, a restructure could improve job security. The indicative content for this unit provides many good examples that can be discussed, but you won't be able to include all of the examples given because of the word count constraints. When discussing, you should give reasons to support your points. For example, if you write that this type of change could lead to job loss, you should explain why it could lead to job loss. The slide provides a little screenshot of the indicative content for this assessment criteria and shows the examples of ideas that you could include. We have now come to the end of this webinar. Recorded webinars are also available for other units in the Foundation Certificate in People Practice. Thank you for listening.